Hey guys, welcome to Kunal Call. I'm Kunal Bhatia and joined by the four horsemen of the Kunal Call, Mustafa, Mikhail, and Farhan. Yeah, Farhan
Hey
McMahon is
yo,
Farhan McMahon name is a big it's a bit too much. But tonight and we are going to discuss about a topic that has been in people's minds, but they haven't spoken about it properly because people don't know what has happened with this particular person. We're talking about Chris Benoit, a wrestler who was so famous. What do you say in the 90s and 2000s. He was one of the best wrestlers of his generation for his intensity, for his commitment to the work. And then sadly, he did something 2007 that really shocked the world. It shocked his family, and it really opened up a topic where you can actually see, okay, there's a particular reason that as to what had happened, but people don't want to talk about it, and that's a problem. So we will start with that. I want to ask Mikhail the first question about Chris Benoit. How did you hear about him, and what do you think of him as a wrestler, not as a person, but as a wrestler?
hey Kunal, thanks for having me again. Great to be back. So actually, man, Chris Benoit is, he's in my top five wrestlers for sure. I absolutely love Chris Benoit. In my humble opinion, I think that Chris Benoit is the greatest technical wrestler, that's ever been seen. His bouts with the likes of Chris Jericho, with Kurt Angle, with the triple threat match at WrestleMania 20 with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, even you know every single time Chris Benoit was in the ring, he gave it his all, and he had this intensity. He was a high flyer, so he was brilliant. And I really feel like it's a shame that he didn't get as many opportunities to win the title. In fact, he never was a WWE champion. But yeah, I mean, like he influenced so many wrestlers, and as a wrestler speaking, I think he will always be remembered, at least by the fans, maybe not by WWE, but definitely by fans, as one of the greatest to ever step foot in the ring.
Farhan, what about you? What do you think about Chris Benoit?
Yeah, see, unlike Mikhail, I'm actually not a big Chris Benoit fan. Never was really, to be honest. I liked him. I did like him, but I was not a big fan. Um, but I enjoyed a lot of his matches. I enjoyed his matches, of course, with WrestleMania 20. I enjoyed his matches with, Eddie Guerrero. I enjoyed his matches, even with Undertaker. I had a great match with Undertaker on SmackDown. Um, Yeah, also at the same time, I know in WCW he wrestled Bret Hart, one of my favorites. He wrestled Bret Hart on the same ring where Owen Hart died. So, I definitely hold, as a kid, I didn't like him that much. But having grown up and understanding the business, understanding all the internal dynamics of wrestling, I've come to respect Chris Benoit, the wrestler. Uh, and I agree with Mikhail in terms of influence. I definitely see a lot of Benoit's work in a lot of current stars.
Daniel Bryan is one example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mustafa, what about you? What do you think about Chris Benoit?
Yeah, as Benoit the wrestler, as they said, as both Mikhail and Franz said, no doubt was great. He was one of the best out there. I've seen people say things like he almost never had a bad match. You could have a good match with anyone. And the fact that he was close to so many other great in-ring wrestlers, he had great chemistry with so many other people in the ring, like Bret Hart, like Eddie Guerrero, and so many other people. And brought out the best in him so many times. I've seen a lot of his matches. I've even seen the one that Farhan was talking about. His match with Undertaker at SmackDown was amazing. He was a really great in-ring wrestler, and yeah, like even like in modern day wrestling, you see a lot of wrestlers who have learned a lot from him, like Daniel Bryan and so many others.
So yeah, we all love him as a wrestler, but this particular topic that we're going to talk about is something that happened in his personal life. Um, is everyone aware as to what happened? All three of you guys.
Yep.
Of
Okay,
course.
so I'm not going to speak about this. I'm going to go to Mikhail now, and I want Mikhail to say what he has learned about this tragedy, and then I will ask Farhan a question. Mikhail, what do you think? What exactly happened with Chris Benoit in 2007?
Well, I mean, he was supposed to actually face CM Punk at Vengeance 2007 for the ECW championship, and in fact, he was replaced by John Morrison. And the crowd, like everyone in the crowd, was actually chanting, "We want Benoit," because like no one understood what was going on. So Chris apparently, he phoned WWE to say Nancy Benoit, his wife, and I think it was Daniel Benoit, his 6-year-old son. They had food poisoning or something, and when he didn't show for vengeance, Vince McMahon, he was concerned about Chris and the family, so he sent a team, or I think he called the police or something, and they found the bodies. And what was concluded was it was a double murder suicide. Chris Benoit had murdered his wife and his son, and then he hung himself, ending his own life. And it just shocked the WWE world. Like, this became mainstreamed. I remember even in 2007, my dad was reading the newspaper and Chris Benoit's picture was on the front page, and he was like, "Wait, this wrestler is dead. You watch him and stuff." And I was in shock. And yeah, I mean, once the details started coming out, WWE initially did a tribute show to Chris Benoit's life, but they refused to mention him now because of it. And yeah, I mean, it's left a very dark impact. There's been a lot of talk about chair shots to the head. There's been a lot of talk about steroids, about the medical team that checks the well-being of the performers before they go out. So Chris Benoit's whole, the tragedy of Chris Benoit is actually what brought us to the PG era, what we see today, no chair shots, no blood loss in matches, all of this kind of stuff. So that's my take.
Farhan, he just mentioned as to what happened with the incident of Chris Benoit. What was your reaction when you heard about it for the first time? And after it's been now 13 years, and there's so many reports as to why it happened or what happened. People are talking about how he was as a person and stuff. Do you think he was a murderer, or do you think something happened to him?
When I first found out about the Benoit, when Chris Benoit died, I was actually pretty sad, because when I first found out about it, it was before the whole story was laid out to bear. And when I found out what he actually did, I was in shock. I could not believe. It's quite eerie, actually. When you think about it, it's quite scary. It's really creepy, actually, that a guy would murder his son, his wife, and then hang himself in his gym room while placing copies of the Bible on their bodies. And what's so why this interests me so much is that according to the autopsy report, there was no signs of any struggle between Nancy and Chris. I know his son was sedated, so obviously there was no struggle when he strangled him. But it's kind of weird that with his wife there was no sign of struggle on her body, so it raises a lot of questions. But no, I was in shock, and it really. One of the things about the Chris Benoit tragedy is that it really sort of opened the floodgates onto just how brutal WWE can be. A lot of people say that the rigorous schedule, the pressure to perform. I mean, these guys are on the road 330 days a year. They have to be in the best shape of their lives. They have to have a consistent diet. They have to go to the gym. They have to perform next level. They have to arrange their own hotel, their own travels. They don't get to see their family. They don't get paid that much, actually, unless you're a top wrestler, but they don't get paid that much. So, and let's not forget the politics. I'm sure there's a lot of politics in WWE. So, all these factors combined together, it can really take, especially up until that point. Now I'm sure it's a little better, but up until that point, it can really take a toll on someone's mental health. You know what I'm saying? It can really, really affect someone mentally and emotionally. And I think Chris Benoit, it's very tragic what happened, but I was in shock. I was really, really in shock of what happened with Chris Benoit. And we keep forgetting that although these guys are larger to life figures to us fans, and at the end of the day, they're still human. They've got families, they've got kids, they've got a life beyond wrestling. So when someone you don't just see Chris Benoit, like Chris Benoit, the wrestler, committed this tragedy. You see Chris Benoit, the human being, who's committed these acts of these acts of that's so barbaric. So it's very shocking. Yeah.
That's a good point. Mustafa, I want to ask you one simple thing. Obviously, I've heard what Mikhail and Farhan have said. How did they react, or how did they come to know? When you got to know the entire information as to why this happened, what was your reaction to it?
Honestly, man, back in 2007 when this happened, I was 11. I was newly 11. As an 11-year-old kid, I was terrified. I was scared. I was like, there are people out there who can do this kind of stuff and then kill themselves. Just to think what must have been going on in his brain absolutely shocked me. I was like, this can't be happening. And honestly, I like stopped watching wrestling for a long time because I was like, this is scary. This is not normal stuff. Yeah, the thing is, like, from what I've heard and what I've seen, there's a really good point mentioned by Chris Jericho in an interview with Larry King Live when he said that someone he knows, a therapist he knows who deals with murder-suicide cases, it's always a combination of things that lead up to something as crazy as this. And that's exactly like what Farhan and Mikhail just said, like whether it was church launch to the head, terrible schedule, or whatever, hectic schedule, all those things takes such a toll on its mental health that he ended up doing something like this. Honestly, my reaction was just shocked and terrified, and honestly, like I just stopped watching wrestling for a long time.
Yeah, that's.
I just have something to add.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say was that just giving my 2 cents on this, that I think the answer is Chris Benoit committed acts of murder, but I don't think he was basically. If you look at him, I don't think the man was, from a slasher movie. He was not a malicious person.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris Benoit was someone who was obviously very sick. I mean, you look at his autopsy. He's a 40-year-old man, and they said his brain was so damaged it resembled an 88-year-old Alzheimer's patient.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like just like process that, and on top of that, like Dark Side of the Ring. By the way, guys, check it out. That's an amazing documentary.
One of the
His
best.
closest friends, like his inner circle, Dean Malenko, Chavo Guerrero, Vicky Guerrero, Chris Jericho, Jim Ross, they all who worked with him, who were close to him, they don't show what they describe is not a man who was a murderer. They describe a man who was one who was obviously not in the right state of mind, and he was obviously a grieving man more. He had a lot of grief in his life, especially with his best friend Eddie Guerrero's death. And even like what's so eerie, like what Farhan mentions is eerie. While Chris was alive during Eddie Guerrero's tribute show, Chris Benoit, when he was talking about Eddie Guerrero, said something like, "He talked me out of it," and I was just like, "What did he talk you out of?" Like, so I'm like, if he was going through such horrible shit that he was saying that while Eddie was alive, imagine like the only person he could talk to was dead. The only person who he felt comfort was gone. And then on top of that, of course, how wrestling, 350 days on the road, how it takes a toll on your mental health, on your physical well-being. And of course, his finisher moved into him any good. I mean, the diving headbutt added to the concussions. So, yeah.
Farhan, you wanted to say something? Please go ahead.
Yeah, at the same time, simultaneously, they've also been shoot interviews of Chris Benoit's behavior as a locker room bully. Now, I'm not trying to say that leads to murder, but realize that there was a dark aspect to Chris Benoit's personality. Like, for example, the Miz was severely bullied by Chris Benoit. Actually, I think I read somewhere, and it was from a verified source, actually, from a shoot interview, that JBL, he has a reputation of being a bully. Actually,
He was an asshole.
yeah, he was an asshole. But actually, what I read was that JBL never bullied The Miz. I was like, wait, what? What happened was that it was Chris Benoit who bullied The Miz. And the reason why they didn't want to bring this out in the open, and because it would sort of show negligence on this side of WWE, that you have this guy who's a murderer and he was bullying people backstage. So apparently JBL took the fall for that, for PR purposes. I actually read that from a verified source.
Wow.
I read this one thing where, which is confirmed by the way, that some superstar disrespected Shawn Michaels. So Chris Benoit made 1,000 spots.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
So that is I'm not denying. I'm sure what Mikhail is saying is correct because I've also read superstars spoken highly of Chris Benoit. But you also have to consider the other side of the story, which is that there were also wrestlers who faced his wrath, who faced the darker aspects of his personality. So you may not think much about it, but then when he commits these acts, these gruesome acts, it's a sort of, it's there is a connection to it. Because ultimately, the way I see it is that, like, I'm not saying bullying and murder are the same thing,
I mean,
but
it's just nuance on your part, man. I
Yeah.
mean, Chris Benoit wasn't an angel and he wasn't a devil. Like, I mean, I guess what I'm understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're kind of like exploring every side of him because, he was a person, he had flaws and he had all good
yeah.
sides.
But
So
the
that's
thing is that like the thing is that like see, could you imagine, God forbid, if AJ Styles did something like this?
Oh,
You
God.
know,
yeah, it
you know
would
what
be
I'm trying
shocking.
to say? It would be shocking, right?
Yeah, it
It
would
would
break
be
your heart.
Yeah, because this is a guy who's, you never hear stories about AJ being a bully. You never hear stories about AJ hazing people. You don't hear stories about AJ having this dark personality. With Chris, you had these sort of. I think there was also a domestic violence case between Chris and
Yeah,
Nancy.
we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
There
Yeah, yeah.
was, there was.
So you know what I'm trying to say. So I think that that's also something that needs to be considered. But like I said, I think Mikhail and Mustafa put it the best way. There are just so many factors.
Yeah.
You can't just like Bret Hart said it the same way. People always say because I know Bret and Chris were very close friends. Bret Hart said it the same way. He said that everyone just says steroids. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
such a lazy. No. Initially, the initial report was like the media initially said that steroids is the reason that caused the Alzheimer's brain to shrink, like how Mikhail pointed out. And then Bret Hart was like, "Well, that's such a lazy answer. You can't just
Yeah.
say one reason steroids unless there's definitive proof." And there was never that proof. So
Yeah.
it's a combination of so many different factors, and it's really mind-boggling.
So you guys have touched a lot of topics. The next thing I want to talk about is CTE. Like Mikhail mentioned that there was an autopsy report on his brain. Mustafa, what do you think about the CTE? Do you think that CTE caused this to Chris Benoit to like it forced him, or maybe it told him to do this drastic actions on his family? Because a 40-year-old man having an 88-year-old brain, it is unstable.
Yeah.
You can't deny that.
Look, I'm gonna get back to what Chris Jericho said again in his interview with Larry King. He
Yeah.
said that his friend was a therapist. She dealt with murder-suicide cases, and she said like so many murder-suicide cases, whether it was an NFL player named Jovan Belcher, other cases out there, it was always years and years of just adding up or piling up of crazy things that cause you whatever mental illness, whether it's depression, anxiety, or whatever. Him having that brain pretty much showed that it wasn't just one thing that happened that triggered him to do it. It was years and years and years of piling up of just messed up shit that was going on in his life
Yeah.
that triggered him to do that. And that's exactly why his brain looked like that. When Eddie Guerrero passed away, that took a huge toll on him. And it wasn't that was the start of it. He was already going through mental health before Eddie's passing. And Eddie was one of the few people who could hold him together. As Mikhail said that, he talked him out of it and no one knew what he meant. And probably they'll never know what he meant. But it kind of shows that he was about to do something even then, even before Eddie's death. So what I think it was a combination of so many things piling up, or just like things just adding up over and over, like just over each other, all these messed up things happening in his life that eventually resulted in this happening.
Good point. Farhan, what about you? Do you think the CTE played a part? And what do you think about Eddie Guerrero's death playing a part on Chris Benoit?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if the CTE is the reason. I think the CTE it was the end result
Yeah.
of many factors. I don't necessarily think it was like a reason per se. I think it was an end result. The CTE is the result of so many different things happening to Chris Benoit. You know, could something like that drive him to murder? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a neurosurgeon. I can never say that. Or maybe I'm not well informed on what the report said with Chris Benoit. I'm sure that's why I'm here to talk about it. Regarding Eddie Guerrero, yeah, definitely, 100%. Like, God forbid, imagine if Mikhail died. That would devastate me. So,
Yeah.
Jesus,
I don't.
dude,
We know what I'm trying to say. Like,
Straight up killed Mikhail.
you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
God
I
forbid,
understand that.
there'll be such emotional trauma on me. So I'm sure that emotional trauma would definitely be on Chris Benoit, especially since him and Eddie Guerrero started this grueling journey together. So that emotional bond is more stronger. No offense, more stronger between Eddie and Chris than Farhan and Mikhail.
No,
So
but with that point you just made, they were together in WCW, then they went to
yeah,
WWE together, and they
yeah,
like, and then WrestleMania 20 they achieved like this,
yeah.
the
They had the same
thing that
problems.
you would imagine,
Yeah. They had the same problem. They had the same problems of them not being Americans, them being small, them not Chris and Eddie both used steroids because probably under subtle pressure because they were not muscular enough. You know what I'm trying to say? So yeah, definitely. I think lose like a brother in arms. Like we don't cry during when the lover and the husband, like when the husband and the wife dies, we never cry. But we cry when a bro and a bro dies. You know what I'm trying to say? Like we
Yeah.
cry when your brother dies. You know what I'm trying to say? Like in
In the
movies.
Yeah, yeah, like
So
in the
yeah,
like in David Benoit, who's Chris's other son from his other wife. He mentioned in an interview with Chris Van Vliet was that Eddie and Chris had shared things with each other that they didn't even share with their own families. So there were things about Eddie that Chris knew that even like Eddie's family didn't know, and then there were things about Chris that Eddie knew that even Chris's family didn't know. That's how close
yeah,
those two were. So losing someone
yeah.
like that is gonna mess you up.
Yeah,
that
especially considering like the lives these guys live. See, when you're on the
Yeah.
road 340 days a week, 340 days a year, you have to have friends and close confidants to get you through those months of loneliness. You know what I'm trying to say? You have Undertaker and BSK. You have Shawn and the Click. You have you have all of these. You got Bret Hart and Davey Boy Smith and Owen.
the Hart family with him,
Yeah, the Heart Foundation. Yeah. So you have all these. You need all these people with you to get you through these months. So for that to be taken away is the
It's messed
emotional
up.
trauma is just indescribable.
you
And the
just
fact that he was already messed up before that,
Yeah.
just adds to it.
with the steroids and all that stuff, that's we all know that everyone used to take steroids and drugs, at that time, because the wellness policy was not that strong, or was not that good in terms of like catching a guy, because they wanted the wrestlers to be there,
Yeah.
even like a guy like Brock Lesnar, who is a natural guy, he doesn't use steroids. But if a normal guy looks at him, he's like, hey, he uses steroids, a normal guy. But there are certain people who don't, and there are certain people who do, because of the pressures that they have. Farhan, sorry, Mikhail, I want to ask you
Hmm.
about the concussion test and welfare policy that has happened now after his death. The impact of his death on sports. Because after that, I believe the CTE and concussions have been taken so seriously now. A guy like Daniel Bryan, who was concussed so many times, he became the world champion, and then he was forced to give up his title because they found out, okay, man, this guy, he might snap or something, he might die. A guy like Edge, for example, even neck injury is so dangerous now. But do you see that there has been some positive change after this horrific thing that has happened? Because we all focus on the negatives, but when you focus on positives of this, that so many lives have been saved. Unfortunately, we didn't want this to happen in the first place. No one wants anyone to die, but it has happened. No, you can't change that. But do you think there's a positive? There has been some positiveness on the wrestlers, even the sports athletes, who are there.
So before I answer that, I just want to even put this out there that when you think about a man who is in his 40s and he has not just any 88-year-old brain, he has an 88-year-old brain with Alzheimer's. It is so possible that even Chris did not realize his own actions until much later, and then when he realized it, that's what forced him to take his life. It's a very possible factor, and of course, I mean, even an MVP. Like this is why I'm so inclined to believe that Chris Benoit was not a a typical murderer. He didn't want to kill anyone, I think, is because even MVP was very close to him. And he even mentioned that the problem is people are not understanding that they're not seeing Chris Benoit as a human, because they're like, yes, what he did was atrocious. But the fact remains, he was not like this man who wanted to hurt people or kill someone. He was something inside of him just broke. Coming to your point about you know about concussions and everything, absolutely. That's my answer. I mean, you talk about guys like Edge, you talk about guys like Daniel Bryan who've been saved. Unfortunately, like Farhan mentioned in the last podcast when we talked about Owen Hart, that unfortunately guys like Owen and Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and the Ultimate Warrior, they are basically the casualties of wrestling's negligence. And that's exactly what Chris Benoit is, just another example of. It shouldn't have happened. It should have never happened, of course. What transpired with Chris Benoit. But like you said, what's done is done. But what can be done, that can't be changed. But what can be changed right now is how's the talent today treated? And I think that WWE has made significant improvements, such as they've banned chair shots. Of course, that needed to be done, considering that the whole point of why Chris Benoit's brain looked like that was because concussions was a big factor in it, and he was taking chair shots, brutal chair shots, may I add. So that was
Chair-
Chris Benoit.
They still
Yeah,
take
yeah.
that time
Chris
you were
Benoit.
straight on the head,
Yeah.
hard like that. And now
Even,
what they do is now
what I saw. This makes me, like, knowing what I know now, this makes me cringe. So there was an Iron Man match on Raw between Chris Benoit and Triple H, and at one point the referee's knocked down, and Triple H doesn't hit Chris Benoit here; he hits him at the back of his head, like bam. And I was just like, knowing what you're like, oh my god, it's no wonder this man had that kind of brain. But yeah, so the banning the chair shots. Even I get concerned that Daniel Bryan is still using the diving headbutt as a move. I'm just like, someone needs to tell him to stop doing that.
don't do that now
And-
that much, like once in 3 to 4 matches you do it, not that much, not regular.
Yeah, but I don't think that should be, like, used at all, because you don't know how, the thing is, people realized too late when Chris was already gone and what he had done, like how bad this is. So why would you want them to do it once if it can be avoided so easily? And yeah, like I was saying, chair shots are banned. Even although, I miss the ruthless aggression and the Attitude Era, but blood, maybe it shouldn't be shown in a match, because again, we don't know exactly how so much blood loss can affect another human being, or what it can do to them, to their bodies. We don't want another Chris Benoit. We don't want another, like, Ultimate Warrior or another Eddie Guerrero. These athletes, just like any athlete in the world, whether it's in football or cricket, these athletes, or UFC, these athletes need to be taken care of, and their health should be a priority for any wrestling organization.
That's actually a good point. Farhan, I want to ask you regarding the concussion on wellness policy that WWE has done now. Like, I think even Roman Reigns was banned from the WWE like for a month, like for going against the drug policy, which is a big thing because, Roman Reigns is such a big guy.
He's the
In
face of the
terms
company now.
He's the face of the company, like after John Cena, like he's the guy. So what do you think about that?
I think that the wellness policy is pretty strong, but because Reigns was the face of the company, an exception was made. You know what I'm trying to say? I always feel that if the wellness policy was as strict, see, do I believe that wrestlers are taking steroids today? The answer is yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah, I do. Do I believe that they're taking steroids to the extent that they were in the 90s or 80s? No. So I'll give you that much.
But before you give me anything, I want to know which wrestler do you think takes steroids? If you can give me an example.
Okay, no offense, but I think Drew McIntyre.
Okay.
I think Jinder Mahal.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, Ryback.
Ryback is too
Yeah.
much. You can see that from a mile away.
Ryback.
And?
I think who else? Nia Jax.
Steroids?
Just joking.
Dad just
I'm
matched with
joking.
Samoan.
I'm
Dad just
joking.
matched with Samoan.
And then one more would
When
be
you talk about steroids, I would like to say the woman
EC3. EC3.
EC3, yeah, that I
Oh
can
yeah.
see
EC3.
there is
EC3 is on steroids. And maybe back in the past, but not anymore. I won't say Triple H, but I don't think now he's doing steroids. I know back in the day he was. But I'd
but
say
you
these
see a significant difference since 2000 and now. The athletes are so, you know, they're so
leaner.
lean. Yeah, they're so
Yeah,
lean that
yeah,
it's good. Like if imagine like Seth Rollins. Sorry for interrupting you, but imagine a guy like Seth Rollins, who looking so ripped, and he's the guy, he's the face, and he's
yeah.
doing amazing stuff right now with Rey Mysterio and his family. The kind of the storyline with this guy. What's his name?
Although they need to cut out the
Murphy.
Aliyah and
Murphy.
Murphy thing, that is so
Eddie Murphy.
that's so petty. Stop
Murphy,
doing
yeah.
that.
Cringy, I swear to God,
Yeah,
it is.
it's something that is really nice to see that normal people can actually become something. And like a wrestler, like if you hone your craft and stuff, then you can have a chance of being someone in this industry. So Farhan, you can go ahead with whatever you're saying.
Yeah, you see, like I said, I do think they're taking steroids. Not as much. I think that maybe they may be taking. I think that they may be taking performance enhancers. I think they may be taking testosterone. I
Hmm.
think that's even guys like Seth and all. I think they're doing that. I think it's see, look at me, for example. I go to the gym very regularly, all right? And I still struggle to maintain a good physique, but I'm working, like I'm not working even quarter of how these guys are working. You know what I mean? I probably train just as hard as them, like in terms of how many days I go and how long I spend. I may not train in terms of the weight, and I may not train in terms of like the intensity, but I do train very regularly. But even I don't look like that. You know what I'm saying? And one of the reasons is because my diet is pretty stupid. But these guys, they're like on the road freaking 360 days a week. I don't know how they're eating clean. I don't know how they're getting all this protein. I don't know how they're able to, like they're resting through injuries. So they have to be on something to do that. So I do believe that steroid use is still there. I just think that it's not used to the extent that it was in the 90s. And even if everyone is using steroids right now, I think they're only using a limited quantity of steroids. Basically, they're using steroids to the amount that wouldn't cause anything severe or that wouldn't gather attention. You know what I'm trying to say? So I think that, like, in conclusion, I'd say steroids are still being used, just not as much.
Okay, that's a good point. Um, Mr. Mustafa, I would like to talk to you about what happened because of Chris Benoit's actions to his family. With the dark side of the ring, you never knew these people who were impacted,
Yeah.
especially his son. And
Yeah.
it's something that really broke my heart in terms of like a 13-year-old boy receiving
Uh,
abuse for something that his father has done.
yep.
What do you say about David Benoit as a person? Because he's one strong guy, man. Seriously.
Yeah, like just like you said right now, he is really one hell of a strong guy. Not just that Dark Side of the Ring video that I saw, but I saw his detailed interview with Chris Van Vliet, another
Yes.
great interviewer, by the way. And the things he said, like, if I put myself in his shoes, I probably would still be traumatized, all these years later. 13 years ago, he was 13 or 14 years old. Just imagine policemen telling you that your dad did this, and this, and now this has happened to your family, stuff like that. And then the fact that he got abused for it, the fact that WWE neglected him as well for it, just absolutely fucked up in my opinion. Like at least they should have done something to David because his dad did contribute a lot to the company, but no, they neglected him. He went through so much hell to see how far he's come. Like he went to college, got a degree, he's working a normal job right now. He's finally happy. Like he's doing good in life right now. That's something amazing given the circumstances he was in at one point of his life.
That's a good point. Mikhail, what do you think about David Benoit and even Nancy's sister? Who was shown properly um, as I mean, she was in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary, which really was one of the eye openers of any particular, like of that particular case. It was an eye opener because I've seen that series in the lockdown in April. I saw every episode again and again, and it stuns me that people forget that these people are family. When Farhan made that point, these people are families. So, Mika, what do you think about David Benoit, and what do you think about Nancy's sister, and how they have gone through this?
So I'll start with David Benoit, Chris Benoit's eldest son. Like I can't really, I can't put into words like what this poor guy has, felt, what he must have gone through, considering it's like Fazal just said that imagine like a police officer telling you your father's a murderer and then he killed himself and now you're all alone. And for the rest of your life, you, because of your last name, something that you had nothing to do with, you were a child, but because your father, who happened to be famous, did it, you have to basically carry that burden with you. And imagine like he didn't, that it puts in this perspective that he's trying to grieve for not just his father but his stepmother and his brother, who he had a dream to be tag team champions with.
Yeah.
And now the wrestling world is shunning David Benoit because of something he's not even done. And even David Benoit himself says that wasn't my father. He loves his father to this day. He respects his father to his day because he knows that wasn't his own father. And coming to Nancy Benoit, Nancy's sister, Chris's sister-in-law, I think that even she made the point that this is where like I was disgusted honestly by WWE after hearing what the sister-in-law said, that only Jim Ross came to the funeral. Even Vince McMahon himself didn't bother to show up. And I'm just like, seriously, David was abandoned by the WWE. The sister-in-law was abandoned by the WWE. These people had no support to grieve. And yet here they are today. David Benoit, he's risen above this. And obviously, he's trying to be a different man. And also Nancy's sister is going as so far as to say that I hope one day I can find it in me to forgive Chris. So, that shows the content of their character, that shows the strength. And it's really, wrong that WWE abandoned them when they needed them the most. And, it's a good thing, though, that David is, people are starting to understand more. I think Dark Side of the Ring opened up a lot of people's minds in the sense they're seeing that David Benoit is separate from what his father did, and to put that kind of pressure, that kind of burden, that kind of ill-deserved treatment on just like a kid is wrong. He deserves to live his own life, and he doesn't deserve to have his legacy before it's even started being defined by his father's actions.
That's a good
Yeah,
point you
that's
made, Mikhail. Because we need to, like, when people say that, this has happened and that has happened, people don't want to understand, why it has happened in the first place. Because when this was a big documentary, we were waiting for, and when it came out, you understood what was going on. You wanted to understand, because as a wrestling fan, because even one guy who come, he just sent me a message like an hour ago. He's like, I was shocked when I heard about this. I'm like, yeah, everyone was shocked when
Of
they
course.
heard. Because no one, you don't expect anyone to take their life or take their family's life and then kill themselves. You don't expect that. Because we see these guys, jumping up top ropes, doing these amazing moves and stuff, and really, being a superhero to all of us. But you mentioned about the WWE. Farhan, I want to ask you, sorry, no, Farhan, Mustafa. Did WWE go too far with the treatment with the Benoit family, like completely shunning whatever was connected to Chris Benoit?
Definitely, I think so. They did go too far by mistreating the family because at the end of the day, David was just a 13-year-old kid who's lost his dad, and the only company his dad ever worked for was the WWE. WCW previously, but the WWE. I get why WWE wanted to distance themselves from Chris Benoit's name because they don't want to associate themselves with the person who's done all this. I completely understood it. I get that. I get why they want to, not include include Benoit in their history and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like, he still has a 13-year-old son who has done nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, WWE is a billion. I don't know how much dollar company, like $1 billion+ company, and they just could have at least taken care of David Benoit. They could have at least taking care of the people in the Benoit family who were suffering from this huge loss, something that was never their fault, and yet WWE treated the whole family just because the name Benoit is so toxic for them that it's honestly messed up how they treated the whole family, especially David, a 13-year-old kid who had nothing to do with what his dad did.
Yeah, that's actually a very well point said by you. Then, when I saw the documentary, I was seeing Chavo Guerrero being emotional, Vicky Guerrero being emotional, and Dean Malenko being emotional. Farhan, when someone of when someone that very well won't do this, does it. For example, like even one of your closest friends, like for example, you give an example of your friend who's here, but I'm just giving you a scenario where how these people must have been affected for so many months or years, thinking that I knew this guy for 20 years, man. I never seen this guy being so crazy, and then suddenly does something that I can't even imagine. Because Chris Jericho is saying that he will be the last person to imagine. He's saying that he will be Benoit will be the last person to kill his own family and kill himself out of 1,000 people.
He said put
And he,
100 people in a room. He said put 100 people
yeah,
in a room, and you'd be the last person you would expect to do something like that.
and that's a pretty shocking statement because Chris
Yeah.
Jericho never lies. He doesn't
Yeah,
take shit from anyone.
Yeah.
So
See, how do you think they took it? See, you want to know a secret of mine? I know this is live though, so I can't say it. But I knew someone who this is live. I can't say this. But I knew someone in Canada who everybody loved, everybody thought was amazing, everybody respected him. He was very sweet, very innocent guy, and then he did something. Okay. So it was so bad that it shocked every single one of us. And I had left Canada for years when that happened, so I wasn't affected as much, but it still shocked me. And a lot of my friends who were victims of his act, were in trauma for like months. So I can't imagine what those guys must be going through in terms of Chris Benoit, because I myself have seen it firsthand. Like I see the effect. Like like I said, God can imagine if Mikhail does something like that. Like what the frick, I'm not saying he would, unless of course I mentioned that.
Why do you keep bringing me into this, man? First you're talking about I'm gonna die, and I'm talking about me being like, come on, man, what's wrong with you?
I'm just trying to make it a little light. That's it. And
Well, okay, fine. Carry on,
yeah.
fair enough.
So
By the way,
it's,
guys, one more point, right? One more
yeah,
point.
sure.
I remember Stephanie McMahon saying it in the Chris Benoit tribute show that he was like this makes it even 10 times more shocking, was that he was a super close family person. He loved his family to death. Like when he found out that Stephanie and Triple H were getting married, he congratulated them with tears in his eyes because he was so happy that they were getting married. He thought family was the best thing on earth. Just to see someone like that do something like this is just 20 times even more shocking, to do this to his own family.
Yeah.
And what's really sad about this whole thing is, it seems like the seeds were sowed. Like, can you imagine when Eddie, they talk about Vicky Guerrero talked about how Chris was this stoic man. He didn't show emotion, and even Chavo talks about when Chris called him that day, Eddie died and said, "Hey, I'm in the gym. Where are you guys?" And they say that when Chavo said Eddie's gone, he said that it wasn't just like a cry. It was like from the deepest part of your heart. That is how badly Chris Benoit broke down. And imagine, like, he would come to Eddie's house and he would sit by Eddie's side of the bed and start just bawling his eyes out. And Vicky Guerrero was shocked because she's like, this was a big, strong man, and he's in my arms just weeping. And of course, the funeral, when Jericho tried to console him, like he said that the tears on the suit went through the suit and onto the shirt. That's how much Chris was devastated. So you hear all of this. You talk about how he was writing in a diary to Eddie Guerrero, like who's gone, but he's writing a diary. So these are signs of someone who is evidently, and everyone knew that he hadn't taken this well. And what's really shocking is Nancy actually wanted Chris to retire after Eddie's death, but he refused, I guess, because he felt lost. He felt like he had nothing left except wrestling. And I guess maybe he saw it as a way to honor Eddie because they wrestled for so long together. So he thought continue to honor his name. But yeah, I mean, it's really just so scary to think that this was, when you know all these facts, or when you know what they're saying, it's like, it was kind of like not, it's something like, oh my god, now it all makes sense, it becomes like
Yeah.
that. So
There's even a video.
you
There's even a video of him reacting to when Rey Mysterio won the World Heavyweight Championship in 2006 or WrestleMania 22 to honor Eddie Guerrero. Basically, I mean, the whole angle was to honor Eddie Guerrero. You see a backstage like segment, right, where the whole Guerrero family comes and hugs him. You see Chris running and just hugging him, bawling his eyes out with happiness. Like, it was one of the few times they saw Chris happy after Eddie died, and that just shows how much Eddie meant to him. Like,
yeah,
that
it was,
video,
it
right?
was it was Eddie. It was things from, like, before he, like, while Eddie was alive, because I mean he talked him out of something. It was
Yeah,
it was steroids, it was concussions, it was probably the workload, it was him not being able to open up. Like, he didn't, no one in WWE actually knew what he was going through, because they said in private with the people he knew, he was like a mess. But when he would come to work, he was like the same Chris Benoit, like stoic and not really emotional and stuff like that. So no one, it's like Chris Benoit felt he couldn't reach out to anyone. He couldn't tell his own employers how he was feeling.
Actually, what you guys have said and what we have actually learned from this is that all of it comes down to mental health. And obviously, there has been
yeah,
negligence on work.
course.
When they took chair shots. And I had a podcast with Mariam, like I think 2 weeks ago, like about mental health and how it is impactful on people. So let's go to the last question I have. I want deep answers and I want small answers. Do you think Chris Benoit will go to the WWE Hall of Fame ever? I'm talking about 20 years, 30 years down the line. Do you think they might give him that respect as a wrestler? Farhan, you can start with that.
No, and I wouldn't blame them. Honestly speaking, I would not blame them if they did not want to induct Chris Benoit. They can never erase Chris Benoit. That's a fact. They can never ever erase Chris Benoit from their past, considering
Yeah.
the impact that he's had. But it makes, from a business and from a company standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't. We talked about how the wellness policy and how the steroid all had changed. Like, it changed because of his actions. So to glorify something like that by inducting him into the Hall of Fame is just in it's in really bad taste. And I think that even his closest friends like Chris Jericho, CM Punk, they've even said that Chris Benoit should not be in the Hall of Fame. So if his closest friends are saying no, then
Mustafa, what about you?
yeah, I think so too. I definitely think so too. I feel like even though he has had an impact, like he has had some memorable moments in WWE, I feel like they've decided to like override those memorable moments by recreating them in other forms. Like that WrestleMania 20 ending, they recreated that 10 years later with WrestleMania 30, exactly the same kind of ending, a triple threat win for Daniel Bryan, celebrating with the whole crowd in New Orleans, pretty much the same copy paste. Whether it was Randy Orton winning, whether it was Randy Orton being the youngest World Heavyweight Champion. I remember Randy Orton saying it in a promo that he beat Brock Lesnar to win that World Heavyweight Championship. Like, it's pretty clear that WWE want to erase this. They want to like overwrite all the memorable Chris Benoit moments by having like them replaced by something else, or like being like just like drawn over by something else. So to see all that happening pretty much shows that WWE are doing anything it takes to keep him out of the history books, keep him out of everyone's memories and all that, and
that's
pretty much
fine.
shows that he would never get into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, what about you?
Well, what I think is that, see, as much as I want to say that Chris Benoit should go into the Hall of Fame, considering his wrestling career, I think that I mean, Chris Benoit, I love him. Like, he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. But the fact remains, like, as Farhan mentioned, like, his closest friends said, and even Stone Cold Steve Austin, his own colleague and a legend of the business, he said that I loved Chris Benoit the wrestler and I loved Chris Benoit the person, but his record as a wrestler cannot come before his record as a human being, and what he did, I think, forever has tainted his own legacy. I mean, he can never be in a Hall of Fame because WWE associating themselves with the Chris Benoit name will always, in business terms, it will, regardless of what you think about concussions and all, the fact remains he did it. He did
Yeah.
those things. And
Exactly.
if WWE acknowledge him, put him in the Hall of Fame, glorify him, make money off of his name, it's in a way that they would be glorifying a murder, and they don't want to do that. I think that WWE is not like they subtly hint at Chris Benoit. I mean, because like they will pique fans' interest who don't understand, because they've said Randy Orton won the heavyweight championship at SummerSlam in 2004. So who was his opponent? So there are ways they are they can't erase Chris Benoit per se, but they can do their best to make sure that he's not mentioned. But you still see the impact he has. Like, I don't think Chris Benoit's legacy will ever die, because you see superstars like Randy Orton, like he has spoken about Chris Benoit separately.
Yeah,
Kurt Angle does. Sasha Banks has mentioned him even outside of the WWE. So because of how good of a wrestler he was, his legacy will live on, but just not the WWE way.
You all three have made good points. I just want to end this podcast by saying that it's so sad to see two great friends like Eddie and Chris work their ass off for so many years, getting the recognition and the love from the fans and the fellow wrestlers. And in the end, we recognize one person completely, and we don't even say the other guy's name. It is kind of tragic. It is for a person that he worked so hard, and his last actions have really just tainted everything he has done in his career. What he did was wrong, completely wrong, obviously, and you can't change that, but you can learn from it. And I hope the wrestlers who are going to the business now learn from that tragedy, that don't harm yourself over wrestling. And what with the Mustafa said, with the WrestleMania 30, when Daniel Bryan won in WrestleMania 30, he actually signifies the kind of energy that Chris Benoit had.
Yeah.
He was small, but he had the workforce of giving everything he had. Even Chris Benoit was the same thing. He really gave everything he had, and Daniel Bryan did the same thing. But what Chris Benoit did was completely shocking. So thank you guys.
By the way, just one more thing. It proves that they're trying to erase this. They're trying to erase Chris Benoit's legacy, because if you ask any wrestling fan out there, not involved with the WWE, what's your favorite WrestleMania moments? Almost all of them have the ending of WrestleMania 20 as one of their favorite moments. No doubt, it's a memorable, legendary moment. However, when you watch WWE's video top 10 WrestleMania endings, number one is that Daniel Bryan ending. It's above all those other endings. Pretty much shows that they're trying to erase that, in my opinion.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, Mustafa. So thank you guys again for joining the podcast.
Thank you, guys.
People who will see this, who are seeing this, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Lots of things coming up. Thank you so much, guys. Take care and God bless, and see you.
See you.